thank you, Jan, Lynn, and Mike for being with us today to talk about our theme, Community Commitment. And Jan, if you could go first with what volunteer opportunity do you participate in during the performances?
Well, I've gotten to experience the joys of both ushering and MC, but MC is especially great because I get to dress up and I get to share the stage to welcome our audiences with really nice people who like to have fun.
And Mike, what about you? What ways do you volunteer with the musical?
I like to do MC.
MCing, and then do you do any other? Do you help out in the lobby at all?
Yes, I do. What's that called? I hand out programs.
Okay, great. And Lynn, how do you volunteer?
I MC and greet before the show.
Okay, so you also MC and greet. Well, thank you guys so much for all your volunteering time. Jan, many that have come to our shows have probably viewed the three of you on stage emceeing before a show. Why is this an important opportunity to speak to community members?
I guess I see it as it's a gift of time, because it's not very often that we get to gather so many folks in one location for the purpose of sharing the joys of HCO's mission. They get to hear about some of the specific ways that their own financial support of the agency pays off in the lives of those that we serve. The community always deserves a great big thank you for their role in encouraging the development of safe and independent lives for the folks of HCO that they get to share the streets of Winona with.
And Lynn and Mike, why do both of you like emceeing?
Well, I like to be on the stage and hold the sign up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so you like to be on stage and hold up the sign that thanks all of the gracious sponsors who help donate?
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn, what about you? What do you like about emceeing?
I like to meet people and talk with them before the show and holding up big signs.
Right. And I know all three of you really like to get dressed up and be on stage together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Yeah, it is.
So today you're here as part of our The Show Must Go On series. So I thought we could wrap up today in the same way that you always wrap up on stage for emceeing. So on 3, if you guys could say the final line that you always say when you MC. Are you guys ready?
Really?
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Enjoy the show.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for pumping up the crowd every year. And we sure will miss seeing you on stage this year, but hopefully you just pumped up everybody for our 2021 production of Annie. So thank you.
I'm here with Steve Libra. He's our set designer for all of our HCO musicals. And we're going to be talking a little bit today about set design as a whole and kind of how it's changed throughout the years. So Steve, if you could share with all of us just a little bit of the history of how set design has evolved over the years, from the early years and then kind of to what we're seeing now.
Sure. You know, the first couple of years we did the productions, we had Denny Schrant as our director. And Denny was what I call a creative minimalist when it comes to the set. Most of the set plans were in his head. And we'd show up at a garage owned by Home and Community Options, and he'd tell us what to build. As we got into it more, though, we started doing bigger and more complicated productions, and I started finally designing sets and making actual construction plans so that when people showed up, we knew what they were supposed to do, and put together colored drawings so that the painters had something to go by as to what we wanted. So it took the responsibility off the director, but to make sure everything was right for the director and I would meet and look over the plans before we'd start building anything.
So obviously, you said before, the as soon as the show kind of is decided, you're really starting to work on the set design, and your role really continues on right in through the show. Can you share a little bit about how you also work with community volunteers to complete all of the set building and the painting, load in and then load out at the theater?
Sure. I'm the set builder that never builds any set, except occasionally in my basement before we actually start set building, because there's things that I want to do by myself. But it takes a crew of about 10 to 15 builders, about 16 hours total for each one of them to build the set. And then when it comes to painting, we can be a little more liberal in terms of the numbers, and it's easier to control. We end up with about 20 to 25 painters at one time working on the project. And so, you know, to get that accomplished, I have luckily a volunteer coordinator who's also a volunteer who makes sure that enough people are recruited and then lets me know who they are, so that before we get to set building or set painting, I can kind of put together a job description list so that they can effectively use their time. So to make all that happen, it takes a lot of coordination from getting the lumber to getting the set pieces into the warehouse where we build it. The first thing we do is we move set pieces out of a barn that we use on Homer Ridge and get those pieces into the warehouse where we're going to build, so that we can reuse a lot of the things that we've used in past years. And fortunately, we've got the barn that's owned by a board member to store those things. Once we finish the construction, and it might be March when we're finished, we don't have a production until June, then we have to find a place for all those things. Last year, we stored it in a semi-trailer to get it out of the warehouse that was used by an active business. And then once we're able to get into the theater, we move it from the semi-trailer to the theater, and then load it into the theater and put it all together. And then the final move is to get everything out of the theater. Very early the morning after the last production, we move out of the theater, take everything apart, move it out the doors, into trucks again, and move the pieces that we can reuse back to the barn. So it takes a lot of man hours to do that, a lot of volunteers to accomplish that. And most of us that build it are involved in the set moves, because we kind of know where things go and how things go together.
Obviously, the last few years we've had projections now, which is definitely something that's new. So how has having the projections changed the way that you do things now, and how does it affect how a show is chosen?
I'm smiling because I love projections. Traditional theater has always used painted canvas drops. I mean, they're heavy, they're expensive to rent, they're hard to move and hang. And nowadays, more modern theaters are using high-powered projectors to show a scene on the back wall. And in 2017, we were going to do Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And you can probably remember the flying car and all the scenes that went flying by. Well, using a static canvas drop just wouldn't have worked. So we started looking into getting a projection system in the Page Theater, and worked with St. Mary's University to make that happen that year. And now we've done Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, we've done Little Mermaid, which had an enormous number of moving projections that were actually animated. And then we also did a more traditional production in 2019, My Fair Lady, and we were also able to use projections in that effectively. It's one, cheaper than all those drops. It's more effective. It's better for the audience, and it's better for the set builder, because I don't have to build so much set. In prior years, if we had a living room scene, we built walls that looked like a living room. Now I just have to project walls on the back wall that look like a living room, and we can tailor it however we want to make it fit our particular production. We've used a gentleman over in England since 2017 to develop those projections specifically for the production that we're doing. and he's been wonderful to work with, and he's on board for Annie next year.
Well, thank you, Steve. I mean, you've been our set designer for years and years. I know I've had such an amazing opportunity to get to work with you for many of those as a volunteer and as a staff for HCO. So I just can't imagine that we would even be able to do near the scale of sets that we're doing without your talent and your expertise. So
Well, somebody will take over someday, but I'm still having fun.
So thank you, Mary and Edie, for being here today as part of our community commitment theme. And you both are representing our wonderful costuming department today. So how many estimated hours go into costuming for the musical each year?
Oh my, it really varies every year depending on the play. But for example, last year we had over 510 hours of just the costumers alone. That really wasn't even necessarily the run of the play. It was the fittings and the being creative with the sewers and putting all the details together. So it could range, it just varies. It also varies depending on how many costumes we have to do. If each character or role has more than one costume, then of course that takes longer. But last year, for example, we had 9 volunteers that did that. And some of them choose to participate by coming to the costume center. Other ones will sew at home. And so it's a nice opportunity for people to get involved as much as they want to be involved. And it's fun to see that character alive, right, Edie? It just comes alive.
Right.
So we had 10 days that we actually did fittings. And during that time, people were scheduled to not only sew while the different individuals came in to get fitted on their different costumes, but also we measured. We have people different abilities with sewing. Some do handwork, some use machines. Some are just writing down what needs to get done so that when the sewer picks it up, they know how to, how many inches to shorten it or to let it out X amount of inches. So that went on for 10 days, this last play, and that varies every year too, depending on the play.
It really is a very long process for all of you. So thank you so much for everything you do behind the scenes that people don't even realize how much work it really is for each one of these characters. Edie, you are both a costuming volunteer and a cast member, so you have kind of that unique feature to you. Can you share how important the right costume is as a cast member to bring your character to life?
Yes, I think it's very important because you want to convey the right attitude for the character that you're playing. And just to reference the last year's show, I played the part of a I want to say she was considered well-to-do, although she was a widow and really wasn't well-to-do, but she wanted to convey that attitude. So the costume had to be a more upper crust type costume. And the accessories, all of the things that go into portraying that character, who was kind of, I saw her as kind of being not snooty, but definitely had an attitude about her level in society. So the costume that we tried for me, the first one worked. It needed some alterations, but I thought it fit the character perfectly. We had a little issue with what kind of a outer garment to wear, because the first scene was an outdoor scene and we started with a fur. And the other thing about being in costume is you have to feel good about what you're wearing. And I didn't feel good about the fur that they put me in. So Mary ran around and she found a few other things to try, and we ended up with a very nice shawl that I thought worked really well with the costume. So I was happy.
Mhm.
And I think, I think it did portray the character much better.
You know, you're so right, Edie, because we really do like to have fun with the character, with the individuals that are in the play, and so we really foster that at the costume center when they come in too. And we'll say, well, do you feel okay with this? So we were really glad in this case when Edie came forth and said, oh, I'm just not comfortable with this. It's like, hey, no problem. Let's get you in something that works for you and you have fun with just as much as it looks great. So love that positive kind of fun stuff, don't we?
Oh, it was a lot of fun being part of the crew too. My role, I wasn't on stage a lot, so I was able to work with the costumers backstage, doing the alterations and the fixing and things like that, helping people find just the right accessory to go with what they were wearing. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Mary's just a joy to work with. So
Oh, you are too. Thank you.
she didn't mention, but there's a lot of things that go on after the show too, with costumes, hauling them back to the costume center, sorting things out. There were a lot of things that were borrowed from other organizations that had to be cleaned and made presentable before we returned them. So that was a lot of work and time as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to being part of that again this year, and maybe from the beginning this year, but maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
Hopefully next year.
Hopefully
you'll be with
next
us, Edie.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to thank you for everything that both of you do and the entire costuming department. That's all volunteer time, and we know that you give up so many hours to volunteer and be a part of this to make sure that these characters come to life on stage. So we can't wait to see what you guys come up with for 2021 for Annie.